Good evening, I'm Derek and welcome back to another Monday Night Mad Monster movie. Tonight we have Asian horror cinema up on deck. We've talked about it the last couple weeks, and that's right, I just decided to go all out between the movies I had bought over the past couple weeks, some throwbacks I had just wanted to revisit. Not to mention, I've also been playing Fatal Frame 1 and Fatal Frame 2 Remake on PlayStation, different platforms. So really just been having fun ingesting all Asian horror. So, you know, doing this past week, it really got me thinking about what first got me into Asian horror cinema. You know, somebody who's always been a fan of foreign cinema, and I think that's really just because it truly does transport you to another world. Developing a sense of someone else's culture, heritage, especially when it comes to Asian culture. They have so much mysticism, you know, spirits, ghosts, demons that are just present in their history, their heritage, culture, and you know, of course, being a horror fan, I love that. And in the horror films or stories, those elements are just that much more present. So, you know, Asian horror cinema, it makes sense to me. But really, I first found it through the movie Audition. Had seen it on like a 100 top scariest movies of all time back when I think I was like in 5th or 6th grade. That list was pretty cool because it got me to find movies such as like The Brood, Black Christmas, The Sentinel, but the standout movie for the foreign aspect was Audition from 1999, Takashi Miike. A movie that I think really kind of put him on the map, especially in the horror world. And you know, we've talked about him before in some previous episodes, but this movie was just really unsettling. That list did maybe, you know, ruin a couple elements of the movie for me, but if you've seen the movie, you know, even if the trash bag scene is ruined, the jump scare there's still enough elements of that movie to keep you entertained. And I, after that, think I found, you know, The Ring with the American remake, and then the wave of J-horror that came to the States in the early 2000s with remakes of The Grudge, Dark Water, and so on. But down the road, that really got me to seek out the originals of that movie, and most of the times actually preferring the originals over the remakes, but not always the case. The standout I'd have to say would be The Grudge. Just I truly do appreciate the original. I think really the best thing the American remake brought to it, besides Sarah Michelle Gellar, was just the scene of that creepy face in the doorway and making that sound, that yeah, I used to creep girlfriends out doing that. But you know, I really do appreciate the roots of these films. So before I get too carried away, let's kick it off with our movies for this week. So to start with, we have Gonjiam Haunted Asylum, and this movie is actually from Korea, from 2018. And I have to say that I never had seen this movie until I purchased it, and that's funny because I've seen the cover of this movie several times on streaming platforms over the years, and I guess I just never really decided to give it a chance until I found a cheap copy of it, really read the back, and discovered it was kind of like a Asian version of Grave Encounters. If you've ever seen Grave Encounters 1 or 2, kind of cool found footage movies of where like ghost hunters go into an abandoned building, they wake some things up or disturb some spirits. Those spirits take revenge out on said characters, and we have a fun movie. As someone who's not really a fan of the ghost hunter TV shows, you know, just they don't really speak to me. Something that's marketed for TV like that, I don't believe it at any point. Now, not saying that I don't believe in the idea of that, just when it's marketed for TV and a popular weekly TV show, nah, it's not believable in my opinion. But a movie that takes those characters, kills them, supernatural elements, I'm all into that. So, and that's what we have here is a group of like social media ghost hunters that decide to go to this asylum, and they enlist the help of, I believe it's some other influencers that just not are affiliated with them, but it's a group of 4 other people, 3 ladies and another guy who's, I believe, going to be the editor for the film, or the episode, I guess, better said. So they decide to go to this Gonjiam mental asylum that's been closed down and abandoned for several years after the director, a lady head of the facility, was found to have hung herself, with a large number of patients also being killed. Never really explains what actually happened there, but after that people would come to the asylum and there's this room 402, and anyone who tries to open that door, with it being the only locked door in the whole building, anyone who tries to open it falls into either a coma or dies. So they say that door is cursed. That's where we come into the show, where they have several activities planned as they make their way through the asylum, such as seances, explorations of labs in different parts of the facility, all culminating when they reach 402 and the fact that they're going to break into said room, saying nothing will stop them. Of course, along the way, we do get some jump scares, and we find out that in the beginning they're actually staged or planned by the people running this this internet show. And you know, that's to be expected with things like this, hence why I'm not really a fan of the real life shows like this, just because I don't believe them. But we do slowly escalate into real events until things really just spiral out of control. Some elements are maybe a little goofy. If you've seen the movie or you end up watching it, you might know what I'm referring to, but there's also a lot of really unsettling parts. I'd say overall, just the atmosphere of this movie, the building itself, is really what sets the tone. I love abandoned buildings. I think they're so cool. You know, ideas like the back rooms of taking public spaces and just they're vast and empty. I feel like that just leaves all the room for bad things to happen. Just something about it, that idea, those settings, they really creep me out. So I love abandoned buildings, hence this setting. I think you guys would really enjoy this movie. Overall, I would say I give it 6 out of 10 isolated mental patients. It is pretty fun. It is all in subtitles. Does have some cool special effects, but overall, I feel like what would have made this better for me is if I kind of knew more of what had happened to the patients, or maybe what the director was planning or trying to do. It just seems like people died and now the place is haunted, and you know, maybe that's all there is. I just feel like they've built a lot around this, that there was probably some really creepy things, or they left stuff on the table to where we could have said some creepy things happened. And again, I don't like things spoon-fed to me. I don't like a lot of exposition, or basically a lot of dialogue explaining things to you point blank. Just not a fan of gratuitous that. But, you know, a little bit, I think maybe could have went a long way in this film. But overall, like I said, 6 out of 10 isolated mental patients. And this movie is Gonjiam Haunted Asylum. So check it out. Now, I have a double feature movie I want to highlight to wrap this episode up, but before we get to that, I do have a few honorable mentions that I've also watched this week that I just kind of want to touch on briefly. So, to kick it off with, we have Hiruko The Goblin. Now, this is another movie that I became familiar with from watching the documentary In Search of Darkness from 1995 to 1999. Never heard of this movie, but I definitely know the director. I'm not going to butcher his name. I do have a friend who they can pronounce Asian names very well, and I know they would give me all kinds of crap to hear me try to pronounce these names. But the director is also the same director who did Tetsu, the Iron Man series. I believe we've mentioned him before on this show, but overall just a very graphic, obscure, out there idea movie. Really graphic, but I feel like it's worth a watch if you're into just bizarre foreign films. But we're not talking about that today. This is another one of his films, Hiruko, and it's really about a goblin or a demon type creature being awoke from a temple who can kind of take the form of its victims and uses a siren song to lure its victims into basically a delusion. So, cool movie, a sad movie, has a awkward ending, just to say the least, but overall I really had fun watching it. I do enjoy watching films from this director. He has a really unique mind, I'd say, let's put it that way. So this is Hiruko the Goblin. After that, watched A Tale of Two Sisters. Now this is another movie that was from the Tartan Asian film, or Asian extreme films from the early 2000s. I would say that's probably what kind of kicked all this off, was me getting back into those films. So this is one of the more popular films from this series, and as you can see, I don't have the original DVD. I have an upgraded Blu-ray box set with this one. Very cool ghost story. I would say a more traditional ghost story. It's really sad. This one, although it wasn't my first time watching, it was, a rewatch for me, it still really hit me. It has an emotional story to it, a unique bond with the family, and you just see how that slowly unravels. And it's kind of like a story that works backwards of where you're finding out what's happened in the past. But overall, I've really enjoyed this film. I think it has good rewatch value, especially you kind of understand more of it as it goes. But that is A Tale of Two Sisters. And then last honorable mention would be Dark Water, from the director who brought us Don't Look Up and The Ring. So Dark Water is another movie that received an American remake in the early 2000s in the wake of The Ring. Cool story, again, a very traditional Asian ghost story with the traditional, Japanese ghost of woman in white, dripping water, long black hair, hiding most of her face. We get a lot of images standing around, but this is actually more kind of condensed to a little girl, which I feel like that image of the woman with the hair, but now resembling a child, that's just all the more unsettling. So really this director kind of took what he did in The Ring and kind of retold it in a different way. Still an emotional story. I feel like this telling is much more emotional than the American version, and that's pretty typical, that the Asian films do have a lot more emotion or human aspect to the films, as to where us Americans, we kind of Hollywoodize everything, for a generic way to say it. But Dark Water, again, not a first time watch for me, a rewatch, and I think this is a really good film. Not a happy ending, but this is a great film to watch on a rainy day. So now, to highlight my week in Asian horror cinema, we have a double feature of 3 and 3 Extremes. It's funny because as I was watching these, I saw these actually just got uploaded to the Shudder streaming platform, both of these movies. So I was like, oh, that's so perfect. You're being added right as I'm actually watching these for the channel. Now, there are 2 movies. It is 3 and 3 Extremes. These were anthology movies that came out in the early 2000s with the wave of the Tartan Asian extreme films. One of these I know for certain, the movie Dumplings, which is the first movie of the second film, 3 Extremes, that was a full feature film in the Tartan film series, and it was then condensed to like a 42-minute movie or segment for this movie. I don't believe any of the others were, but if somebody has seen one, feel free to correct me. I know there are over 80 films in the Tartan Asian Extreme film series, and I have not even seen half of them, to be honest with you guys. But to kick it off with this 3 and 3 Extremes, we have the segment Memories, which I feel is like a real human segment for this one. You're really kind of seeing what happened with 2 different characters. We have a woman waking up on the street, not knowing, or I guess it doesn't really say, but one assumes that she's not aware of who she is, where she came from, what happened, because she's using things that she finds on herself in her pockets to kind of piece together where to go, finding a receipt in her pocket that leads her to call her home and eventually to an address. Then on the other side, we have a husband who has a daughter and he doesn't know where his wife is. They had an argument, she left, he doesn't remember what they argued about or if he even knew where she was going, but now no one can find her. So you can kind of see where this one's going, but I like how this was told. Even though I saw the ending at, all the way down at the end of the tunnel, I really did have fun getting to that ending. There is some really unsettling images in this, and it does create a good atmosphere to the segment. I keep wanting to say film, but segment. So I thought that was like a great way to kick off this film for 3. The next segment, we go back to feudal Japan, where we deal with some puppets, where puppets were used to tell these grand stories. And at the time, thankfully, they have a little snippet that kind of explains the purpose of the puppets before we get into the segment. So you have some more understanding before you're seeing what's going on. We don't always get things like that. I do believe we could have watched the segment without that, but at the same time, it didn't bother me. For something like this with an anthology, I guess I would prefer just a little, 30-second clip up like that in the beginning. You get a brief understanding and then boom, it's story time. So this is where these puppets, they are believed to have spirits inhabiting them that allow the storytellers to fluently tell their stories, where the puppets are believed to come to life. And there's a master of this puppet troupe, and he is believed to be the one in control of these spirits. And he is said to have a bond with a demon that then curses these puppets, and if the master was to ever die, the puppets should be buried or burned alongside him, because anyone who uses said puppets after will be cursed. I'm sure you can imagine where the story goes from there. So to wrap up the 3, we have what I feel like was the best segment of this movie. Really hit home. Or not hit home, but it hit hard, and it's left me thinking about it honestly 5 days later. So I don't want to give away the ending of this, but I do want to talk a little bit about it, where we really have this, it starts off with a police detective moving into an abandoned building with what's maybe his 6 or 7-year-old son, and the little boy's struggling to carry a big briefcase into the building, and we quickly find out that the building is actually being demolished within a month. There is nobody else living there. The landlord, superintendent, whatever, is taking them up all these flights of stairs to the room. Why they couldn't just stay on the first floor if the building is abandoned, I have no clue. Or even the second story. Okay, get off the ground. Why do you need to go all the way? I don't know. I'm making it complicated. But along the way, they do find that there is somebody else staying in the building, and the landlord tells him, he's taking care of his invalid wife who is paralyzed from the waist down. So they move in. The little boy starts seeing a little girl around there. She's creeping him out. The dad's giving the boy some crap for it, like be a man, because the dad's also going off to work and just leaving the little kid there all by himself. You know, dad of the year. But the little boy eventually plays with the little girl. She takes him to this weird photographer, and then the dad can't find the boy. So he goes looking for him, goes across to the only other person living in this big complex, and that man says, I don't have kids. There's no kids who live here. Goodbye. So the dad is not buying that, breaks in and discovers this man has actually killed his wife. And he's then knocked out and wakes up to realize what's going on. We kind of find out that this guy is, at least we perceive him as not a bad person, although some bad things have happened. As we come to find out, his wife had cancer, and they are both medical students who believed in Chinese ritual or holistic medicine. They don't believe in big hospitals, chemotherapy, radiation, all of that. So their plan, their belief was he was to strangle his wife and then to bathe her in these oils and herbs and all of this and that for a period of 2 years. And he was to talk to her every day so that way her spirit would not get lost and would stay close to the body. And after a 2-year period, her body would heal itself of the tumors and she would awake fully healed. And the man has made some videos to play while talking to his wife. That's kind of how our dad character wakes up, is hearing how this man and woman first met. So we're given a lot of information, and we don't know what to believe along with this dad, and he's not buying it. He thinks this guy's responsible for his kid. Eventually the police show up, they rescue the cop, they separate the couple. Some really emotional things are taking place at that point in time, but what we do find out right after is that this man was also found to have cancer, and it was 6 years ago. He went to one treatment of radiation, was treated, never came back, had disappeared for about 3 years. When they finally found him again, he was completely healed of all of cancer. We see that the wife had made videos for the husband similar to what the husband had made for his killed wife. So we're realizing that the husband had cancer, the exact same cancer that his wife had. His wife had killed him 6 years ago, had did this 2-year treatment. He had woke up, was fully cured, and now it was the wife's turn. It was the day the wife was to wake up when the police showed up. There's really some unsettling things that happen. I feel is a very emotional story. And we get some images at the end that also involve the little girl and the little boy. I don't want to go into too much because I do find that this was a really impactful story, but it left me thinking about who that boy was, what had maybe happened to him, what had happened to the little girl, and the situation, the dad, the husband and wife, all of them that they had found themselves in, and just really the tragedy of loving people, I think, simply put. So, wow, what a way to wrap up the first movie. So then got into Three Extremes. We kicked that off with the story Dumplings, I'd already mentioned. This is, I would say, a film in the vein of The Substance, where people are looking for the eternal youth fountain. Everybody always wants it. So there is a woman or a witch, a bruja, whatever you would call her in Asian culture, but she basically has a way to give people eternal life. She says she's the best advertisement for her own medicine, as she claims to be a very old lady, although she's perceived to be in her early 30s. She doesn't say how old she is. She has no way to prove it. She just makes a claim while smoking a cigarette and making some dumplings. I think a lot of people would do that. But anyway, there is a unique recipe she has for these dumplings, and it is slowly giving our protagonist her youth back, her confidence. There is, I believe, some like pheromones she's putting off that's reattracting her husband who's been cheating on her. And just like all of these things are slowly starting to go her way as she's diving deeper into this dumpling lifestyle. And I don't want to ruin what's going on with these dumplings, but let's just say that they come from us, and it's pretty disturbing to think about, especially to be so knowing of what is in those dumplings and to just gorge yourself on them. Especially there is a scene where we do see how the dumpling filling is obtained, and it's upsetting. It's upsetting what happens afterwards. So, and it's upsetting to think like things like that are actually very real, even without dumplings that give you eternal youth. So just, yeah, a disturbing kickoff to the movie Three Extremes. They are extreme. Our next one, it actually deals with a director who we get two different parts where we're on a movie set, starting off not knowing that we're on a movie set. A unique story. It's really a story of revenge, and I feel like the revenge aspect is definitely rooted more in the Asian culture, as to where we see more the reverse, I feel like, in America. But this is where a character is being punished, our protagonist is being punished, not because of doing something wrong or doing something mean or wronging somebody or being just too rich or whatever the case, or even jealousy. No, it is because he is rich and he's a nice guy. Our main character, or our protagonist, claims, what's a poor man to do? You have it good in this life, you're rich, you're nice, you'll have it good in the afterlife. What am I to do? So I go home and I beat my wife and kids, because yeah, I guess that's what you do. I don't know, it doesn't make sense, but this person feels very wrong to see somebody, I guess it is more of a jealousy aspect, but he does argue that it is not jealousy. It is, he needs to bring this man down to everyone else's level and challenges him to sin to save his wife as he is slowly mutilating her. It's pretty disturbing, especially as there's some developments to the husband-wife relationship. And I guess it just really asks the question of how far would you go to save your loved one? What is moral? What is right? And would you continue to want to save your loved one even with everything on the table, I guess? So yeah, unique way to look at it. And then we get to our last story, which is a film from Takashi Miike. So we started this episode talking about him. We've talked about him before as a man who's done hundreds of movies, or done hundreds of filming, I should say. Why not wrap the episode up with him? So we have a story from Takashi Miike where we have a woman who is disturbed. She has dreams, flashbacks, she's hearing stuff, seeing stuff, and we're not really sure why. She's trying to get help, and as the story goes on, we basically find out that she is a twin, and her twin is dead. And as the story goes on, we find out she's actually kind of responsible for it, as they were contortionist twins who performed in basically like a sideshow magic act. Not sure the context of how they were performing, but they were doing this act and there was like a fatherly figure to them who favored the deceased sister over the live one and was showing her favoritism, attention, giving her gifts, and apparently she was the better performer. So the sister, being jealous one night, actually locks her sister in this little box. And we don't really know what her intention was, as she's saying like, sorry, it's only one night, but she's caught by the fatherly figure who disrupts her, scares her, shames her, and feeling hurt and wronged, she lashes out and she attacks him and actually like cuts him up. And he kind of like, I believe he's going to her in a way of sympathy, like he feels sorry for her. Yeah, I think he's understanding. And she's scared, backs up, knocks over a lamp, and actually catches the box her sister is in on fire. I was disturbed to see that. Although it's not graphic, just I was invested in the story at that point. And just, no, not your sister. And I think that's really a exemplary of everything that happened on this past week. I would say all of these episodes really kind of pulled at my heartstrings. They are all very emotional stories. So, but needless to say, our protagonist, she feels extreme guilt over what happened to her sister. The spirit of her sister would rightfully so feel vengeful towards her sister, not understanding what had happened. Why would you do this to me? So our protagonist goes to the scene of the crime, and surprisingly, it's like still the same all these years later. As she shows up, we're realizing that the fatherly figure, who is still alive, the attention he gives is not the attention anyone would want. So that's gross. And then, things really just go from there. It kind of spirals out of control and our story wraps up. So I don't want to ruin this, but I thought that this was a disturbing way to wrap up 3 and 3 Extremes. Each one of these were really emotional. They all had a lot of human elements to them while also being supernatural, which again I think just exemplifies Asian cinema, of how they're able to just blend all these different elements together and it makes sense, as opposed to sometimes I feel like movies made here in the States, when you try to do that, it's a farce. It seems, just so unrealistic or forced in a sense. So yeah, 3 and 3 Extremes, and I would have to give this one 8 out of 10 severed fingers. So you guys can check this one out on Shudder, which is a streaming platform. So yeah, 3 Extremes. I hope you guys have enjoyed our night in Asian horror cinema. I have to say, I actually have reshot this episode a few times because each time it was just running so long. I was talking so much. I've really tried to condense this. So if you have something you want to comment on or have questions on any of these movies discussed, I actually have a lot more I could say. I don't feel like we're quite there on an hour episode for Monday night yet, guys. So, but I also have so many more Asian horror films that I know we're going to be doing a part 2. Not this month, maybe in the coming month or 2, but we will definitely circle back around to this. With that said though, let me know if you have any favorites in the Asian horror films, if you're interested to check any of these films out, or if you have seen them. Let me know what your thoughts, your takeaways were, or some favorite kills, as these films are notoriously gruesome. But until next time, folks, stay spooky.